Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. We are so glad that you have decided to join us today for an advocacy update from three of our advocacy directors. We have Jessica Larson, who is our Director of Advocacy and does a lot of our Protect Democracy, or all of our Protect Democracy advocacy right now. And we have Annie Benton-Waddups, who is our advocacy director over children and families, as well as Miranda Cutler, who is our advocacy director for our Shoulder to Shoulder advocacy group. They are going to be sharing what their groups have been working on, maybe give some updates on things that they've like call to actions or anything that they've put out there that we've been meeting on that some of you may have participated in, and just give an update of where we are in those areas. So I will go ahead and turn the time over to Jessica.
Hi, thanks, Rachel. Happy to be here. Happy to be here with my colleagues. At MWEG, we do a lot of advocacy work, but what exactly that means and what that looks like and how that fits into the broader legislative process may at times feel like a bit of a mystery. And perhaps you've asked yourself, how does this process work? And how do organizations like MWEG participate in the process? And are we really making a difference? And I'm here to tell you that we are making a difference. And my colleagues, Annie and Miranda, and their committees have been working on some really important bipartisan federal legislation. And they're going to walk you through that process of how we decided to engage and explain their efforts. And in so doing, hopefully shed some insight into citizens' participation, into MWEG's participation, and how our laws are made. And I'll turn it over to Annie.
Hello, yeah, it's so great to be here. Thank you, Jessica. And I'm really delighted to be able to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in the children and families advocacy area. And specifically, I think what I'll do is talk about the child tax credit advocacy that we've been doing, which has been sort of front of mind. And many of you may have seen some of our calls to action for that. To back up a little bit, we are really blessed to be invited on some national working groups with other faith-based organizations. I know both Jessica and Miranda also sit on similar groups in their areas as well. And what is wonderful is that piece of it gives MWEG the chance to amplify what we believe in as we collectively join with other nonpartisan or bipartisan efforts to get something done that is important to us. So a lot of the information and guidance that I've received in helping MWEG navigate the child tax credit has arisen because I've been able to be on this weekly committee that meets about it. And when we thought about what sorts of issues MWEG wanted to support as the children and families advocacy area came online last year in 2023, it became clear that child tax credit would be an issue federally, especially because it had been really amped up over the COVID assistance years. And so child tax credit received a really great boost, and it was able to give everyone an idea of the kind of impact. It was almost like a research study. What happens when we give a little extra to families, and where do they spend it? And the research all resoundingly said families spent it on their children, on food, on diapers, on things that their children needed. And it raised so many families out of the poverty level and so many children out of the poverty level. And that money was never intended to last forever, but it did give everyone a sense of what might be possible. And so enter sort of this next round. Child tax credits are definitely a bipartisan approach. They began with a research project under President Reagan, who really felt like there needed to be some tax relief for families who had children. And then through the years, both parties have always supported it. It was passed under Democratic presidents, but sponsored by Republican senators. It's just, so all the way along, we felt good about supporting it. And so I'll just fast forward to, after we decided, yes, this is definitely something that ticked the boxes for us internally, we usually review and have leadership decide, like, is this something that officially MWEG can support? It is bipartisan. It is research-based. It is intended to support families. And we believe that a strong family supports a strong democracy, and helping families get on the trajectory for success alleviates a lot of problems in social equity and in future employment and education, lots of really important things. So we've been going all in on this, which is why you've been seeing it a lot. It's not the most exciting thing because it's a tax bill, and but it is very important. It's one of the key mechanisms to return money to the pockets of families for them to decide where they need it. Do they need new windows because they're freezing? Do their kids need shoes? Do they need transportation? It's great to return this. So the process is long on the federal side. So we have the bill was first negotiated in a committee, and then the parties came together and decided, yes, we can agree to this, sent it to the House, and it passed the House. Let's see, I'm trying to think when that was. It passed the House last month, resoundingly, and now we're waiting for it to be introduced in the Senate. And there's lots of ways it could go. It could be passed on its own. It might be pulled into some of this continuing budget appropriations bills. But at the heart of it is, no matter which mechanism it gets passed, we want to see this happen. And so I will express great appreciation for the many letters that were sent all across the country to many different representatives. I was just looking to see what the final count was. We had just under 350 letters sent for child tax credit, which was amazing in such a really quick turnaround. We've had just a little peek behind the curtain. When we ask for a call for letters, we can see who has done that and can reach out and say, would you be interested in turning into an op-ed? And so we have done that in several instances in Nebraska, in Utah. We've asked people if they would be interested in turning their letters into op-eds. And so far, two of those have been published, and we have 2 more that are coming. I just finished a meeting this morning with this coalition who just expressed such gratitude to the great work that we're doing. We have had some in-person meetings with Senator Crapo in Idaho with our members who are his constituents. And those are powerful meetings where I've heard our members share really vulnerable stories of the financial position that their families are in, and how with both parents working, one working at night, trying to sort of pick up the baton for the next, which I think really impacted the Senate staffers that were listening. They wanted to ask more. They kept turning the attention back to these personal stories. Can we ask more about what would help? Where is this? So I just want to end by saying, when we share the personal impact that these have with our representatives, they are able to more fully realize what it is to live and raise a family in America today. And they are able to remember the emotional connection and the very real life connection that legislation has. So I think when I look at success, of course, success would be that there's a child tax credit bill passed this year. But if there isn't, it's often incremental, where you've laid the groundwork and we've shared what would be good legislation to us, and we'll come back and talk to them when they write the next tax bill, which is set to expire in 2025. So no matter what, our voices are being heard. We are being seen as reliable and people of integrity who really just want to figure out how to get this to work for families. So I'll toss that, unless somebody has a question among us about that, but I'll toss it back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Annie. Miranda, we'll just go to you.
Hi, I'm Miranda. Thanks, Annie. That was really a great description of all the good that you're doing. And I love that we have a children and families advocacy area now. It just makes so much sense for us to be doing that. And I'm excited to see where this bill goes. And actually, we are finding there's a lot of overlap in our advocacy areas. The child tax credit, actually, there was a podcast. If you're a nerd like me and like to follow all things immigration, I highly suggest that you check out the Bipartisan Policy Center has a podcast called This Week in Immigration, which they actually just publish it every other week, I think. But this last week, or maybe it was this week, they their podcast was on the child tax credit as it relates to immigrants, which I found really interesting. Anyway, when I started doing this role as immigration advocacy manager at MWEG, it was the end of 2020. Well, no, I'm not sure of the date, but I was looking back, and in August 2021, MWEG put out an official statement entitled Official Statement from Mormon Women for Ethical Government and on our ongoing obligation to Afghan allies. And so we're looking at almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when we put up this statement. It's a beautiful statement. I just want to read the end of it. It says, "We call upon every American to hold our political leadership accountable, both in the expansion of our refugee programs and for their treatment of Afghans entering our country. We have the opportunity to save what we can from this enterprise, specifically good Afghan people." So this was right after we pulled out of Afghanistan after 20 years supporting the war there in Afghanistan. Thousands of veterans served there, and there were thousands of our allies, 37,000 were initially evacuated from Afghanistan. And there's a lot of misconceptions and blame thrown around about what happened in those moments. Some people think that Afghans came here directly, but they actually were first sent to places they call lily pads, where they were vetted, and then they were brought to the United States. And their status as they came, the president has the power to grant humanitarian parole. Now, the way that the statute is written, it should be kind of done on a case-by-case basis. So some would argue that he has overused that humanitarian parole authority. But he was able to bring them here, and part of the reason why, I mean, it's meant to be an emergency thing. We pulled out, and suddenly these people who had fought alongside us were talking about interpreters, many women. I'm surprised how many women were serving as judges in the courts that we as the United States helped set up, and their families, of course. But even contractors, like people who were helping to clean, or employees who were helping to clean like a military base or something like that. All of those people become targets for the Taliban and are very unsafe, and many of them were killed. So they are desperate to get out. So all of them came here, 37,000, and there are still thousands of people who need to be evacuated. Many of them have gone to third countries, which just means another country while they await being able to come to a safe haven. So all of them came, and we immediately began advocating for an Afghan Adjustment Act that would change the status, this humanitarian parole status, to a more permanent status. And that has been easy in after previous wars, like the Vietnam War. It just happened right away with bipartisan support. But here we are. That was August 2021. And we are February 2024, and we still have not passed an Afghan Adjustment Act. However, like Annie said, we have made a lot of progress, and it's been really interesting and empowering and exciting for me to see how much happens behind the scenes and how much power we have as women of faith to speak out and make a difference. So the Afghan Adjustment Act was conceived right around August 2021, but it was not introduced until August of 2022. But in all of those months preceding, MWEG was part of the Evacuate Our Allies coalition, which has grown so much. It includes faith groups, faith-based groups, veteran groups. Even there's a gentleman who his son did an Eagle Project where they helped Afghans, and now he's a very involved participant in that group. But we did hundreds of meetings with legislators, introducing them to the concept of the Afghan Adjustment Act long before the text was written, long before it was introduced in Congress. And it's really interesting as we see some legislation get introduced and it gets thrown out right away. I've really learned that if there has to be a lot of groundwork built in order to get bipartisan support for bills. And the Afghan Adjustment Act is a really great example of this, because we met with Republicans, we met with Democrats. We found that Republicans were very resistant to it because they want Biden. Many of them, they want Biden to take the heat for what happened, and so they are less hesitant. I mean, they're less willing to get on board. But even with that hurdle to overcome, the bill was introduced with bipartisan support in 2022, huge bipartisan support, and then reintroduced in July of 2023. And so in the House, there are 45 co-sponsors of the bill, and it's equal Democrat and Republican. And the Senate bill has 17 co-sponsors, so huge numbers of support. And we worked so hard. MWEG worked so hard for those. Many of our members attended legislative meetings, and these are women who have helped resettle, some of them hundreds of families. I wanted to, and we've had 10 women published op-eds in these states: Utah, Nebraska. Oh, no, I don't have a separate list, but women in Utah, Idaho, Nebraska, Arizona, Texas, Oregon, Kansas, and New Mexico have all either written op-eds or participated in legislative meetings. I think I might be leaving out a couple of states. Some senators and House members we've met with multiple times. We've met with Senator Lee's office, I think 4 times, about the Afghan Adjustment Act. And every time we're able to get women who have personal experience. We have even a veteran who I believe she didn't serve in Afghanistan, but served in Iraq, but she can directly testify the importance of supporting our allies in this way. So lots of work has been done. And like Annie said, in some ways it can be discouraging. Like, why is it happening so slowly? And Annie, I like what you said yesterday about we're just nudging the boulder, just slowly moving it along. And there's so much support for this bill that when we have moments like we just had with the border piece of the foreign aid bill was introduced a couple weeks ago, and it included a version of the Afghan Adjustment Act because it was ready to go, right? Now, in the end, they pulled all of that piece of the legislation out, but we are hopeful that it will be put in another vehicle. We're hoping for the appropriations bill that's coming up, and we have this grassroots support from so many groups, including MWEG, and as we collaborate with them, I'm so hopeful that we will see progress on this so that we can get safety and security and permanence for our Afghan friends. So I think that's everything I have on that. But if you have any questions or more you'd like me to talk about, Jessica.
Well, I'm just kind of focusing a little bit on the kind of the actual process. Like, how often are you meeting with the coalition? How do you meet the coalition partners? How do you contact the legislators? Are they really receptive to having a call with you? You know, do you think it makes a difference that we're coming in as a group? Would an individual have as much luck, or do we really need to be together to amplify our voices in a way that they're more heard?
That's a good question. It kind of is different for every legislative office, and we do a lot of, I meet once a week with Evacuate Our Allies. There have been some periods, we call them war room meetings, where we meet every day for a couple of weeks when things are moving fast, but typically we just meet once a week. And we'll do a lot of like they'll say, okay, this senator has showed interest, so he's our target. And we'll brainstorm. We even had a meeting once where we spent a full hour talking about a specific senator who had a lot of power at that point. and just talked about like, okay, what are his interests? What things does he not like? What are his concerns going to be about this bill? How can we specifically address it? And then we very carefully, like might encourage an opinion piece be published, or talk to the press about certain coverage, or invite certain people to a meeting that we request. As far as requesting the meetings, it can take a long time. Like it'll sometimes take a couple of months, and a lot of it is timing. Sometimes they're very busy working on other things, and they have to prioritize. They'll be interested, but they don't have time to meet with us until it becomes urgent. And so we have to activate at those key moments when like the bill's just been introduced, or there's like when our legislators come home during their break. Sometimes we'll try to schedule meetings with them because they have time and are wanting to engage with their legislators if it's close to an election, or there's a lot of strategy that goes on there. But I would say that we are really strategically very helpful in this work because we represent women of faith who are often considered to be like a target voting population for a lot of these legislators. And we also have we have people on the ground across the nation. So, when somebody says, oh, does anybody know anyone in Idaho? I'm meeting with people who are largely based in DC, and they're like, I don't know, I know the staffer, but I don't know anybody who's a constituent. And constituents hold a lot of power because at the end of the day, our legislators are accountable to them. And, when you're in a state where it's an easy win, then legislators don't necessarily care to listen to their constituents. But I would say that I haven't met any legislators or their staffers that aren't interested in hearing what their constituents want them to do, because that's what they're supposed to do. And when we hold them accountable, that's when they do what we say. And I think sometimes they're surprised that this is actually something that we're interested in, and we can give them that insight. I think that was all of your questions. Did I answer all of them?
Great, thanks. Annie, do you have any insights that you can add to that?
Yeah, so I would also add that I think it's definitely a combination. So I do think that there is power in being a part of a coalition where our voice is unique for lots of reasons, including the fact that we're a grassroots organization that has members who are interested in being heard. And sometimes we bring an insight that hadn't been thought of before. And so I think there's power both in contributing some of the strategy and intelligence to, intel to the process, but also as consumers of that as well. Like, as Miranda's talking about, like really understand such a wonderful way. These are, we are not policy analysts per se, but we definitely benefit from the really great work of policy analysts that help us understand the impact of different policies and ways. And I think, as Miranda said, it's very powerful that we come from the principles that we do and that we're nonpartisan. We can go into any legislative office as sort of a group of women who are really looking through principles why we support something. And I think that's admired. And I think that's another power that we bring. And I wanted to make two shout outs, one to chapters. So when we knew that Senator Crapo had a really important role in considering the child tax credit, of course, we have members and a very active chapter in Idaho. And so reaching out to Rebecca and their access and knowledge of the political landscape and their membership has made it really wonderful, and have been a really great and unique voice in this. So that has been, and I think that's like ideally how it works is we find opportunities and then we bring it to places where they have people who are willing to speak up. And then I wanted, when I talked about op-eds, to just mention that we have such a wonderful op-ed lab, which, Donna Carlson heads that up, and it really eases the process to very quickly. We have partners that say, do you have anyone in Virginia that might be interested in being heard on this? And they are so appreciative and frankly astounded how quickly we can find and invite and produce a draft for an opinion piece on something. To the, in some cases, they've been published like dozens of times, and picked up by like a can't remember what they call it in publishing world, but like when they have like a lot of
Syndicate? Is it a syndicate?
A syndicate, yes, thank you. Syndicate. And so it's that wonderful, and so that was through a partnership. That was through like participating on a group like this, where we produce the thoughts and provide maybe the thought leadership, and then they have ways to help us get them placed and amplify the voices. So I think those were your questions.
Yeah, and speaking of shout outs, Annie mentioned this, but I want to reiterate that we so appreciate the letters that people write. We put out calls to actions, and I think we've done 3 for Afghan Adjustment Act over the last couple of years. And it doesn't take long to just click and add some personalized text to send the letter. But it really makes a difference when they start to see patterns of letters. They're getting a lot of letters, but not as many as you would expect. And those letters are really powerful as they come in. And I had the opportunity in November of 2022 to go to DC and deliver stacks of letters to those legislative offices. And I was surprised. It's hard to get meetings with legislators, but when I mentioned I have the letters, they're like, come on in. And they, it's kind of a PR opportunity for them to come in and talk to us. And that was really powerful. And I just felt so grateful to all the women who took just a few minutes to do that. We're so busy and we have so many things come into our inboxes and come across, come through our feeds. And I really appreciate all the women who have been willing to do that. And by the same token, women who, I've called them, emailed them, texted them saying, hey, can you just come to this meeting with Senator so-and-so tomorrow? Sometimes it's last minute, it takes a while to get the meetings, but then sometimes when that right moment comes, when they have time or it feels urgent, they'll say, can you meet with us tomorrow? And I'll reach out to people and they'll, on their lunch breaks at work or with toddlers in the background, they'll sign on and it's not comfortable. And and when you first start doing it, it's very overwhelming because you're right, we're not policy experts, but being able to share their personal stories is so powerful. And I really appreciate all the women who have gone out on a limb and been willing to do that, and look forward to more of that work and want to make sure that they know it is making a difference. It's not that just because the Afghan Adjustment Act hasn't passed doesn't mean that we're not making progress, and we'll get there soon. And if not, we've learned a lot in the process.
Thanks so much, guys. As you've been talking, it's made me and maybe this is because I'm over protecting our democracy, but it's made me so grateful for our constitutional democracy, that we have the right to petition our government without fear of being punished or any type of reprisal, that we can get together a group and we can assemble, our right to assemble together with these coalitions and to really participate in our government, and that our government is truly of the people. And I also just wanted to point out that even though right now our Congress, there's a lot of division and it's not functioning as well as it could, but even when Congress is functioning as well as it can, our legislative process is supposed to be difficult. There's supposed to be a lot of tug and push and pull so that we get to the right compromise, so we get to a piece of legislation that works well. So any of this type of stuff, that a lot of this is just part of the process. And a lot of times we like to say, oh, it's all the polarization or it's the difficulty of the times. That's part of it, but part of it is it was designed to be this way, which is, kind of makes it exciting and makes it feel that everybody has at least an opportunity, hopefully, to participate in that process. So that's kind of what advocacy is doing right now, and I'll turn it back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you to all of you guys for joining us today and sharing updates of your areas. I've put some links. I'll put one more in the chat, hopefully before I end this meeting, to thank your senators. So I put some different links in there for information. I will also put those on MWEG Central and in the Facebook discussion group. So if people would like to go and read some more from the MWEG website of these areas that we've talked about today, and I will find the link for the op-ed lab and put that in those spaces as well. So that if you are interested in writing a letter, as they discussed, and sharing your opinion to your community, that is a great way of reaching out and doing that. And like they said, we have a great group of women that will help you do that and make your opinion printable, publishable, I guess. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing everybody back on the Grow next week. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rachel. Thanks, all.